The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
And welcome in, everybody. A brand new week of Need to Know. Kip Kiefer with you on this Labor Day week. And that's an interesting holiday every year, first Monday in September. And like a lot of things, I like to, kind of enlighten folks that, maybe don't spend a lot of time thinking about where things emanated from or how they started. Labor Day basically was a product of the late 1800s after the Civil War. What's commonly known as the Industrial Revolution in America really boomed, and it led to all kinds of steel manufacturing companies, various factories mass producing items, really kind of everything you can possibly think of industry and business that had popped up. But at that point, there was no regulatory controls on anything. People had to work. Government was not in the business of doling out money to people. That just hadn't been invented yet. That was still about 60 years down the road before the New Deal was brought to the forefront by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So in the 1880s, you had people working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day for very, very limited wages. But again, to survive and take care of your family, those folks had absolutely no choice but to accept things the way they were. That started to change in the 1880s. In fact, on September 5th, 1882, basically an organized walkout from businesses all around the country, especially in New York City. Hundreds of thousands of laborers, workers showed up on that day in September 1882 to actually march through New York and demand reforms from major companies, which were controlled by some of the richest guys and richest families in America, to make some reforms. And it was kind of the birth of labor unions in this country. The workers basically kind of stood up for themselves and said, enough. We want 8-hour work days. We want some more reasonable wages for all that we're doing. It was just a very difficult, hostile kind of environment. And that did lead to the official adoption of the first Monday, my bad, of every September becoming a federal holiday, Labor Day. That's when it started, and that's when it was put into play. So that's the origins of Labor Day. 1884 was the first time the federal government declared this a national holiday. I like to talk about history because it really correlates to everything that we discuss here on Need to Know. And, the basic theme generally is all of the craziness that's happening all around us. We're in a situation where inflation and cost of items is at an all-time high. There is a strong division in this country. But it really is kind of remarkable that you have this, quote, divisiveness when really the perpetrators of the whole movement to divide the country have an agenda, and the division isn't 50-50 like characterized. You can look at polling like we've been talking about in recent weeks that indicates that almost 80% of Americans say this country is going in the wrong direction. Now, if you get 80% of any collection, in this day and age of to agree on a basic premise, that tells you right there that we don't have the right down the middle divisiveness that is characterized by the modern day media, which is another situation that a whole show can be devoted to in terms of talking about their role in all of this. But I do want to start out by saying, and again, if you're a first time listener, we're thrilled to have you on board. I always kind of preface my remarks by saying that I am not a conspiracy nut. I'm not an ideologue. I'm just a regular American who loves my country and loves my family and loves American traditions. And they're under assault right now by people that have a completely different agenda. And all I try to do here on Need to Know is acquaint you with facts of what's happening in the country and let you make your own decisions, but look at it through a perspective that maybe you don't have access to, because one of the agents of all of this turmoil is the modern day media. And the reason for that is because if you look at the incestuous correlation between media and government, it's kind of astounding how many people are in lockstep, even to the terms of a lot of marriages and siblings and a lot of close associations in both of those institutions are involved and really in cahoots, which has always been a funny word, but in cahoots in propagating this myth that America is evil and America is racist and America is somehow responsible for all the woes that are bestowed upon the world, when just the opposite is true. It's the greatest country ever conceived, and the opportunities here are limitless. The American dream is still very much alive for anybody who wants to pursue it. And if anything, we need to enhance those opportunities and make it more accessible to more people, that by the policies of the same people that are pushing this agenda right now, it has not been politically expedient for them to let people that are in impoverished situations and in desperate straits and do not have educational opportunities and chances to improve their lives, to lift themselves up. And that's what we need to do. Right now, they're trying to drag all of us down to those kind of levels instead of raising the people up that really need most of our attention and devotion right now in terms of making everything possible for them. You have to give the left credit. And again, I have to emphasize again, this is not Republican versus Democrat. That is the easy way to kind of label everything and shrug it off and say, well, this is politics as usual. It's not. This is a movement being pushed by people that are extreme left. And it's funny that our president last Thursday called anybody who loves their country and their family and their religion and traditions. I'm having a hard time accepting the label put on me and just about everybody I know last week, that we're extremists because we believe in America and the American dream. I'm probably the least extreme person that I could possibly name. But you got to give them credit for one thing. The left develops their themes, they trot out their talking points, and every single member of that movement says the same things. They really stick to the narrative and they don't vary from it. And right now you're hearing it's all the rage in that community that anybody who is not in favor of the direction that they are pushing the country right now including myself, and again, most of the people that I know, we are a threat to democracy. That's the buzz phrase right now. We threaten democracy because we're not going along with a lot of these policies that are being put forth in front of us. First of all, you have to take a step back and define what democracy is. Democracy is majority rule, and it's a nice concept, but direct democracy is not what system was put in place. And now back to the historical references. In the 1780s, we just talked about the 1880s when we got the first organized labor movements that has led to this Labor Day holiday. 100 years before that, when the Constitution was adopted by the brilliant minds of our forefathers who could foresee things hundreds of years down the road that are truly remarkable if you really get into the origins of a lot of the things that define our country constitutionally. But the whole premise of democracy is not the system we have, because if it was a direct democracy, I don't know about you, but a month ago when they voted in a new $650 billion government spending spree to basically drag us into this green energy era, which in theory, okay, I guess it's defendable that down the road sometime that you can start to phase out, high carbon ways of fueling ourselves and powering our nation. I still have great trepidation that taking cars off the road is going to alter the climate destiny and ultimately the disposition of how the world's going to be down the road. But certainly it can be argued that that is not a positive contributor. But we are by no means ready to adopt this direction. California is talking about going to all electric cars, basically outlawing any kind of fossil fuel driven machines. But at the same time, right now, they have a restriction on the hours you can even charge your vehicles of the people that already have made that investment. The grid is not there. The energy infrastructure to facilitate what they're trying to do is years from proper development. And yet we're being forcibly led down this path that we're just not ready for. And the price of that is complete economic disarray. And, when the fuel prices are just completely out of line, that is a domino effect, because what that does is it's going to lead to higher prices and lack of goods, because what is the entity that fuels all of our goods and services deliveries? And it is the whole concept of gasoline powered engines in trucks and trains, and the way that goods get to market and the way they are priced. And if costs are excessive, guess who's going to pay the price for that? It's not it's not those companies. It's going to be you and I, the consumers. So with all that being said, to be called an extremist is a little bit discomforting, because what we have is a constitutional republic where we elect representatives to decide these things. That $650 billion package, I didn't get a chance to vote on that. Did you? If it was direct democracy, we would go to the polls and decide yay or nay on that. And basically, looking at the country and that poll I cited moments ago, when more than 70% of Americans think the country is going in the wrong direction, I don't think a $560 billion spending package that increases taxes and kicks this green energy thing that we're not ready for high into gear. And by the way, hires 87,000 new IRS agents with an $80 billion infusion into the IRS to basically shake down every American, including you and I. Don't think they're not coming to a neighborhood near you. If you've got any kind of side entity where you're picking up a few extra dollars, get ready to be under assault, because this is how big government, you got to feed the beast. This is how massive central government survives. And what's the premise it's based on is raising revenue. Follow the money. That's always the solution to everything that's happening in our country and in the world since the beginning of time. There's a lot of things that are happening that are distressing. The politicization of all of our institutions. Um, Look at all of our agencies, the behavior of the FBI, the politicization and infusion of operatives into every entity, like the Federal Trade Commission, the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Communications. These are all the basic tenets of our Constitution: free speech, free trade. Um, and you've got people that are ideologically inclined in all of those jobs now, making decisions. Even things like the CDC, a lot of the pandemic policies were tainted by political decision making, and they're even trying in the courts this idea of packing the Supreme Court to make it just a go along political operative instead of what it was intended to be, which is the arbiter of anything that is proposed policy wise, and make sure it measures up to constitutional muster. That's even under assault. So it's a distressing kind of thing that we're watching unfold here, and there's even more insidious areas. The breakdown in our society of law and order is just astounding. You look at the unbelievable increase of violent crime in our country recently, hitting home here in Alabama, close to the heart. Brian Robinson, a draft pick out of Alabama, great running back the last few years for the Crimson Tide, drafted by the Washington Commanders. I'll never be able to come to grips with having to call them that, but having grown up in Washington and being a big fan for a lot of years. But he was drafted by the Commanders before even the first game. There was an attempted carjacking last week involving him, a 17 and 15-year-old suspects. And Brian Robinson was shot twice. And thank God they're not life-threatening injuries, but it's going to certainly put a damper on the beginning of his football career. And it illustrates, in loud and clear, somebody high profile, an NFL draft pick, he's targeted for violent crime. It happens to people every day all around the country. And we've had a total breakdown in law and order, and you can trace it right back to these policies that the tech companies and, the major financier of a lot of these issues, George Soros, are pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into local elections. And you say, why would they be doing that? Well, they're controlling who's the district attorney, who's going to prosecute cases. In so many cities in America now, they've adopted these policies to not prosecute people, or to let them right back out on the street after they are arrested for crimes. So you're just putting the criminals right back in circulation that continue to be the perpetrators in all of these violent offenses, where we've gotten away from incarceration, and the excuse is that it's an unjust system, that they should not have to do jail time because it's their circumstances that motivate their actions. That's a very noble idea, but from a practicality standpoint, it undermines and destabilizes our safety, and law and order is a must in a free society such as ours. So you've got that, but they're also manipulating elections. And if you pump enough money into local elections, you're going to be able to swing the tide just about every time. They're getting county clerks and different lower level officials put into play that control a lot of the mechanisms, like elections, in all of these different vicinities. Joseph Stalin, probably the most horrible dictator of all time, once famously declared, "It doesn't matter who casts a vote. What matters is who counts the votes." And I think we saw a real representation of that in the 2020 election. It just boils down to we need to be aware. We don't need to get caught up in the whole sweeping narrative that's being presented to us and not being presented to us. The suppression of information is the most, you talk about a threat to democracy, not telling people what's actually going on accurately. The Hunter Biden laptop before the last election is the ideal example of that. If there's any chance that your elected leader is compromised by deals that were made with foreign governments, particularly our biggest adversaries, that is a major factor. And for that story to be totally suppressed coming up to the election, and that's what it was censored and prohibited from even being discussed, not to mention the fact that the FBI had possession of the laptop, which was 100% verified. And they even went, as we talked about last week, to some of the big entities, information outlets, and encouraged them to disregard it because it was Russian disinformation. And 55 former security or intelligence individuals, including 5 directors, signed a letter that said this is to be disregarded because this is not a real thing. That is direct election interference. And I'm sorry, that is the most powerful threat to our democracy that I can name. So they play the game of reverse reality. They project back on their opponents and dissenters the exact same things they're doing and try to create the perception that they are the ones who are the mainstream and the others are the extremists, when it's just the other way around. Just food for thought here on this edition of Need to Know. I really appreciate everybody tuning in and listening and just considering the facts. That's all we're looking for here. When our president says we believe in truth, not facts, if that doesn't stagger you a little bit from an intellectual standpoint, it should, because truth that is just agenda driven is not truth. Truth is irrefutable fact. That's exactly what the definition is, and that's all we're trying to convey here each week in getting you to think in those terms. We appreciate everybody being on board for Need to Know. Don't forget, also on Tony Kurre Radio each week, we have our new football show, Wanna Bet, which has great information on all aspects of sports and football wagering, particularly. Off to a good start on the college football season with a lot of exciting games. Alabama and Auburn both in the win column here on the local basis. And Alabama goes to Texas this week to play the Longhorns in Austin. What a great matchup of traditional powerhouses. Although Texas has fallen on hard times in recent years, that should be a great game to look forward to this coming week. We're out of time. Kip Kiefer, I always am appreciative of my listeners and your desire of what you need to know. We will be back again this time next week for more here on Tony Kurre Radio, which we're just delighted to be a part of. And we hope you have a great holiday week and get off to a good start in your basic pursuits for all the things that those folks back in the 1880s stood up for and made possible. Have a great time this holiday week, and we will talk to you again next week here on Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.